Not long ago on the Spector Creative channel, I made a video overviewing the ownership of the Masters of the Universe IP, intellectual property, meaning who owns Masters of the Universe. And well, much like a Facebook relationship, it's complicated. The bottom line is that the rights were sold in the 90s for various reasons, and they wound up through a series of acquisitions with Universal. You can see the full video here if you want to know the whole story, but the bottom line is, while Mattel no longer owns Masters of the Universe, they do have certain rights to the brand. And this includes what's called first pass at the toy category, which means if Universal wants to see toys made of Masters of the Universe, Mattel has the first right to make that before passing on the idea. And this is exactly why we see so much Masters of the Universe at retail right now, or at least coming to retail in the next year. Everything from the Origins figures, which also now includes a deluxe SKU that actually has action features, much like the vintage line, as well as toddler toys like the Masters of the Universe Little People, done in the cutesy style, even Skeletor's cutesy skull face, as well as extra-large Imagine-X figures. Of course, there's the Mega Constructs sets, and not one, but two shows coming from Netflix, which will both have toy lines, Revolutions and the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe CGI show. So, with all of these new toys coming out, it's essentially, if Mattel doesn't make these, Universal then has the rights to go to another toy company and say, hey, we want toddler toys, we want a card game, we want collector toys. So Mattel is basically making a lot of this product because they have the first pass, and if they do pass, then someone else comes along. And this all changes in 2023 when all rights revert to Universal, and Mattel no longer has first toy pass. They would have to pitch for the product just like anyone else. So, with Masters of the Universe on its way out in 2 more years, Mattel is looking for new heroes, and I think this is obvious with the release of the upcoming Back in Action line, where older characters in Mattel's IP catalog that they do own outright, as opposed to Masters of the Universe or She-Ra, are coming back as a series of what I believe are 5-inch action figures modeled after the form factor of the Secret Wars toys from the mid-'80s. So let's take a look at who these characters are as we prepare to welcome them back to the toy aisle. So first up, Major Matt Mason, and I'm going to go in chronological order here. So Major Matt Mason goes back to the late 60s. He was Mattel's astronaut toy. There was a little news about him 10-15 years ago when Tom Hanks looked at possibly doing a live-action movie with Tom Hanks starring as Major Matt Mason. It was Tom's favorite toy growing up. And there's a big reason for that. It was huge in the late 60s. Now, while there wasn't that much content outside of some storybooks and a few comic strips, the toy line itself was really embraced by kids of the time. And you didn't just see action figures. There were all sorts of auxiliary merchandise, including t-shirts and sticker books, but the heart of the brand were the action figures. And these were action figures in the sense that, well, I mean, they were figures that went on adventures. They were articulated, albeit bendy like Gumby, and they had all sorts of play sets and vehicles, and it was all about getting to the moon. And the reason this was so aspirational for kids is, well, that's what was happening in the world at that moment. America was working on getting to the moon. And in fact, Jet Propulsion Laboratory scientists who helped, or engineers rather, who helped design some of the equipment for the moon landing worked for Mattel afterwards and helped design the toys, which meant the toys looked very much like the actual devices, ships, and suits that NASA used while faking the moon landing. No, I'm just kidding, but am I? Either way, the actual moon landing used equipment that very much looked like the toy line. And that was why kids really got into it, because they could relive these actual adventures of real-life heroes who were landing on the moon and very aspirational to them. So next up, after Major Matt Mason, was Mattel's Big Jim. Now, Big Jim has an interesting history, and it continues all the way through today because he is the father or sometimes uncle of Max Steel. You could see the full video here for that scoop. But when he was first out in the 70s, he was your everyman adventure guy. He was basically Mattel's male Barbie. And no, I don't mean Ken. I mean he was a male character who could be or do anything, depending on the outfit he was in. And the outfits, much like Barbie, were sold separately. You could get figures dressed up in different action poses or action modes, but the main version was done through getting different outfits. Eventually, in the late 70s, the content for the brand centered around Big Jim's PAC, P-A-C-K, which was an acronym. And this was Mattel's sort of version of the Avengers, or the X-Men, if you will, where Big Jim was going to work with some of his big, tough allies to fight crime and make things awesome in the universe. Or, well, world. They didn't really go into the universe that much the way Major Matt Mason did. And of course this meant the brand got a reimagined look at retail with new packaging, new logos with the wolf's head, and you could now see Big Jim truly as kind of a superhero with his fellow superhero characters going on car chases with motorcycles and helicopters and all sorts of things. Big Jim is also notorious as being a line that developed many, many action features that Mattel would later use in Masters of the Universe. In a lot of ways, it was the testing ground for what eventually became Masters of the Universe. You could see a lot more about that in the link above, but yeah, it was an interesting line that contributed a lot. It did not contribute Battle Cat, though, despite the On the Tiger Trail use of this mold. The Tiger, which eventually became Battle Cat, actually goes all the way back to Mattel's Tarzan and the Jungle Cat set, where the mold eventually that became Battle Cat and Panther started off as a panther. So, yeah, that's Big Jim tends to get credit for this one, but it goes back even farther than him. But it definitely had an influence on Masters of the Universe. All right, last but not least, we have Pulsar, the ultimate man of adventure. So this was another sort of late 70s action hero in Mattel's catalog, in scale with Big Jim, much bigger than Major Matt Mason, and he battled against Hypnos, I almost said Krypnos, Hypnos, the ultimate enemy, because, when you're the ultimate good guy, you need the ultimate enemy. And the big feature for him was that you could see his organs inside and how they worked, and it was kind of like, magic see-through skin. Of course, he did wear an outfit that covered this up, but if you uncovered him and took off the superhero outfit, well, underneath were all of his action features where you saw all of his organs and his blood and how he worked, because everyone wanted to see inside of their favorite heroes. Well, while that might seem a little odd from today's perspective, you have to remember what was happening in the 1970s with toys, and specifically action figures, and with some of Mattel's competitors. Because while Big Jim was on its way out, there were other toy companies coming along and creating action figures based on an emerging property, the $6 Million Man. And to say this toy was revolutionary and had a huge impact on the toy industry is an understatement. It was huge. Being able to look through his eye and see crime and hold the Bionic Man in your hands and work out his adventures was amazing. It was one of the first real action adventure TV shows that translated well into toy consumer product. And the same way the Bionic Man had all of this going-ons inside of him, if you will, well, Mattel wanted to compete with their competitor Kenner and create their own version of the $6 Million Man, and that became Pulsar, Man of Action. So, call it a ripoff, call it an homage, call it following trends. Hey, this happens in the toy industry all the time. One company does something and another is going to follow it up with something very similar. While the $6 Million Man line grew and included some sub-characters, Pulsar never really made it past the two main, the hero and the villain, and it never quite became as popular, probably also because it lacked the content and the entertainment that the $6 Million Man had. When you have a hit TV show, you have a hit toy line. Now, this isn't the first time Mattel has brought back older characters. You can see Major Matt Mason there in the back of this shot of the Addatubes from San Diego Comic-Con in, oh gosh, was this 2009, 2010? So I worked on this line, and you can see multiple Mattel characters. You saw Mighty Max there. These were shown at Comic-Con as a way of bringing out a line that could compete with Hasbro's Addatubes. Hasbro Mighty Mugs. Mattel was Addatubes. And they were shown at Comic-Con, but without the overwhelming support from the fan base, they never went into production. I still kind of think Mattel missed the boat on that one, but Mattel was really looking for huge amounts of online support and interest in this in order to go into production. There's Mad Scientist, another Mattel IP. So this line was done more to preserve copyrights and trademarks. These were figures that Mattel was about to lose the copyright to, but by making these Addatubes, they could keep it. So fast forwarding today, as He-Man walks off into the sunset and leaves Mattel in 2023, well, Mattel is definitely, I think smart, digging deep into their catalog to see if there's interest in more of their IP as action figures. Personally, I would have loved to see these at 6-inch. I think being able to pose Major Matt Mason or Big Jim with my Marvel Legends, my DCU Classics, my MOTU Classics, that would have been awesome. I even had a plan to bring Major Matt Mason into MOTU Classics. That's a video for, well, you can see the link here. So, will these do well at retail or online? I guess it's up in the air. If you like this video, please do share it with others. It helps the channel a ton, and I appreciate it. Subscriptions, comments, thumbs up, ringing the bell, all that's great. I just hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.